Well, it's hard to know when it is that you'll be watching this. And so I'm not sure whether to say good morning to you or good afternoon or good evening. But what I'll do is simply say welcome or welcome back to our virtual meeting house, which this week begins in our tribal crafts room, in our mission partnership room, as a way of reminding ourselves not only of our own connections with each other, but of the connections that we continue to share with people around our region and indeed around our whole world. Those connections remain intact and vital. Well, having talked to a good number of you this week, I know that for many among us, this is getting to be a little bit old. I know that some of the adrenaline of the first weeks has worn off and that this is all starting to grind, this business of social isolation and distancing. I know. I feel that too. But what I hope is that what we're doing right now, gathering virtually for worship, is a time for you and for us all to take a breather, to be reminded of our shared capacities as human beings, and to be called toward our best and our highest selves. I hope it's also a time to remember that there is a force greater than us, which holds us, which encourages us, which strengthens us and supports and loves us. I hope this time helps you to feel the assurance that this journey is but temporary and that you have the strength you need to get through it. More than that, I hope it helps to remind you that you're not walking through this alone. Before offering our call to worship this morning, I do want to share a few important things with you. Many of you will have seen the letter that we sent out by email on Friday. And if you haven't, a paper version is going to go out sometime later next week, and so you can look for that in the mail soon. But in a nutshell, here's what it says. First, we know that this is both a public health crisis and an economic crisis. But in both cases, the crisis is having uneven effects. Some people's health has been profoundly compromised, while others haven't felt much of anything at all. Some people's finances are in free fall, while others seem to be doing just fine. We are all of us in different places in that regard. But if it's possible, we would like you to ask that you keep on, if you're able, that you keep on fulfilling your pledges or your weekly offerings to the church. Many of you have already been doing that, and it helps enormously to keep our church and our outreach vital. You can do it electronically as well. Our website is equipped to handle credit card contributions, and it can be set up to make donations on a weekly or a monthly basis or whatever schedule you might choose. We're doing okay so far. But if you are able, it's now more important than ever to help to keep FCCOL vital during this crisis. And so thank you for all that you're doing in that regard. But I have another request that I'd like to ask that you consider. Many of us have already received relief money in our bank accounts. And if we haven't yet, we soon will. For some, that money will come just in the nick of time, and it's going to help to pay the bills. But for others of us, it's simply free money on top of a salary that hasn't been interrupted. If you fall in that latter category, I'd like to ask that you consider donating a portion or maybe even the entirety of that relief money to a fund that we're creating here at FCCOL. We'll call it the Love in the Time of Corona Fund, or the LTC Fund for short. And it will go toward meeting the basic needs of those who are struggling right now. Things like food, rent or mortgage payments, utilities, gas, internet connectivity, whatever it might be. Those are needs that we've already been approached about, and we anticipate that those are needs that are going to increase in the days and the weeks and indeed perhaps the months to come. And so consider that as a possibility if if you have that freedom right now. Conversely, let me say this as well. If you happen to be in financial freefall at the moment, if you are living uncomfortably close to the bone right now, and if there are needs that you're discovering as this crisis grinds on, please reach out and please let us know. It might be that we can help, especially if we can manage to build this fund. For many of us, being in the kind of position of needing to ask for help is entirely new, and it is humbling, to say the least. Because usually, many of us aren't used to asking for help. We like to be the ones who give it. But right now, you see, we're all in the same boat together. We're all experiencing need and deprivation, though each of us in different ways. And so please, please know that there is no shame in naming your need and in asking for help. We all need help right now. And I think one of the hidden graces within this moment might be just that. Learning to say, help. The thing to remember is that there are people who will respond. The thing to know is that we'll be here for you if and when you have a need, whatever that need might be. Finally, it does fall upon me to share some sad news with you. We experienced 3 deaths in the life of our community this past week, though I hasten to say that none of them are related to COVID-19. Adela Wilmerding, Joan Silberberg, and Sally McCracken all died this past week, either just before or on or just after Easter. Funeral plans are on hold for the time being, which you can only imagine adds to the difficulty of this moment. And so it's especially important to keep all of those families in your prayers. The Wilmerdings, the Silberbergs, and Bob McCracken and his extended family. If you have occasion to do so, reach out and let them know that you're thinking about them. Reach out and let them know that you care and that you love them. Now is the time to do that. There is one final thing I want to say, and that is to thank all the folks who are helping with this video today. I'm going to thank Laura especially for taking on the sermon, which is a great relief to a poor preacher after Easter. I want to thank Carlene for her role this morning. I want to thank Mary Tomasetti for her help with filming and with uploading. I want to thank Odile Brennan especially. Many of you don't know all the work that goes into preparing these videos, the splicing and the work that it takes to get it all together. Odile is doing that, so thank you, Odile. And thank you to John Kiker for getting all of this uploaded onto the internet and presentable for our church, ready on Sunday morning. Thank you to all of you. But thank you goes to all of you who are watching as well for your role in continuing to keep this community vital. I know it feels a little strange to say it in this way, but it's still true. It's good to be together in whatever places we happen to be. It's good to be together. Let's turn now to our call to worship, inspired this week by the words of Psalm 118. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. No matter quarantines or distance, no matter our uncertainties or our anxieties, no matter our frustrations right now, this is the day that the Lord has made. And so rejoice. Find some way to be glad. Let us worship God. And now would you pray with me? Loving God, we thank you for another day. May we use it to hold fast to what we know to be good. May we be enabled to perceive the good around us and other people. Fix our eyes on your story and our hearts on your grace. May we remember that there is but one world and that there is but one common humanity in whom you have placed your light, O God. As a result of our worship, may we be enabled to sense the needs of others more vulnerable than ourselves. May we be enabled to sense our own vulnerabilities and to name them and to ask for the help that we need. Grant us wisdom and grant us courage for the facing of this hour. Help us to be a people of prayer, using the words that Jesus taught to his disciples, saying together, each in our own space, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. As we come to this moment of our pastoral prayer, I'd like to return to the words of the psalmist, words that I used in our call to worship a little earlier in the service. This is the day that the Lord has made, and so let us rejoice and be glad in it. I do know that it can be hard to feel that kind of joy right now. I know it can be hard to feel glad when our worlds have been reduced to our living spaces, and when our interactions with one another are two-dimensional images on a screen. It can be hard to feel that joy, given that all of our plans for the foreseeable future have dissolved, like salt in a weakened broth. Still, and even so, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and let us be glad in it. Let's open ourselves to that possibility in this moment of prayer. Join me if you would. God of Easter mornings, God of surprise visitations, God of accompaniment along the pathways of life, we know that you are a God of incarnations. You come to us as one enfleshed, with a body, with skin, with hands for touch, with feet and legs for movement. In your risen form, you invited our touch. Put your hands here and put them here, you told Thomas. You come to us embodied, helping us to understand what it is to be human, what it is to be a creature of the earth, and what it is to have flesh. You taught us and you continue to teach us how to live into the skin and the bones that we are. God, we come to you in this time in which incarnation, our incarnation, has felt reduced. We come to you in this time in which human lives appear as flat images on screens. We come to you in this time when hands cannot be touched, when a hug cannot be shared, when skin cannot be caressed. We come to you in a time when our lives feel as though they have been rendered as flat as those images we see of one another on our computers, without dimension and without volume and without space. We come before you in this time in which our internal lives sometimes seem to be governed solely by the flatness of fear and anxiety, of impatience and frustration. We come to you in a time in which, for much of our waking hours, we feel less than fully incarnate. Remind us of the power of incarnation, yours and ours. Remind us of the depths and the dimensions that we do possess. Remind us that we are more than our fears, more than our anxieties. Remind us that we are persons, capable of imagining, of enacting lives of expansive and contagious hope. Remind us that we do possess vast storehouses of wisdom and of patience and of gratitude and of generosity and of kindness. Remind us what it is to be a people of resilience and of tenderness and of imaginative care. Remind us of the fullness of our humanity and of the best that we have it in us to be. Remind us of the multi-dimensional life, which is our own incarnation. But remind us too of the bodies that we possess, bodies that need movement and that crave touch and that require closeness and that hunger for intimacy. Though we cannot be with one another right now, give us to know the joy of these bodies that we possess, in the food that we eat, in the walks that we take, and in the tenderness that we offer to those we share our lives with. Give us to celebrate the feel of wind on our faces, the feel of rain on our heads, the feel of sunshine on our skin. Though we may be distant, enable us to use our words to reach out and to touch one another. Give us to understand with compassion the struggle of other people as they too negotiate what it means to be incarnate otherwise, in other ways. But we also trust that you continue to become incarnate over and over again for us, O God. We trust that you are walking through this moment with us. May those who are sick know that you are there beside them. May those who are alone feel the touch that only you can provide. May those going crazy from the company they're forced to keep incessantly be given patience in this moment. May those who grieve sense your presence in the locked rooms of their world. May those who have already been traumatized know that somehow you are there and that you have always been there. God of flesh, God of continual incarnation, God who accompanies us through our confusion and grief, help us also to know the freedom that you demonstrated. May we know that it is a freedom toward responsibility, a freedom of shared burdens, a freedom of care for one another. May we sense in your life among us and in the sacrifice you made a deeper freedom and a truer freedom than the freedom merely to do our own thing. May we sense in you a freedom toward community, a freedom that allows us to sense the need of the most vulnerable and to respond with generosity. Above all, O God of flesh and hope, give us to know that this is the day that you have made for our incarnate bodies. Give us to know the gladness that you intend, even if in a different form, even if in a different way. God of life, touch us now. Amen.
Good morning. I'm going to offer for you the scripture lesson today, and I thought I would do it from a different place so you get a different view of this meeting house. This, in fact, is one of my favorite perches here in the meeting house. So I'm going to read to you from Luke, from the conclusion of the Gospel of Luke, the 24th chapter. This is the story of two women who find they meet Jesus on the road to Emmaus. The same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along together?" They stood still with their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these past days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all people. The chief priests and our elders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but did not find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going to go farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks and broke it and began to give it to them. And it was then that their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way, how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. This ends our lesson.
Good morning. On Good Friday last week, I found myself standing next to a simple wooden coffin, the wind whipping up through our small company. I'd been invited to officiate at the graveside service of a friend's father who had passed away at the age of 93. An honor that has remained with me at this unprecedented time when life and death seem to go hand in hand. We sprinkled earth mixed with flowers over the coffin as the treasured stories were shared, remembering the legacy of love that this father and grandfather had left with his beloved family. I stood 6 feet apart, a quiet witness to the tears and the stories and shared humor. The cold finality of death was tempered by the warmth generated by our reflections of this giant of a human being. He had graced the world not only with contributions to science, but his own gospel ethic of mercy and the love of all things mountainous. This was an experience of Easter on the road, even as it took place in a cemetery. That is the juxtaposition we are living. Life and death, kindness and fear, pandemic, and the seeds of immortality. Not too different from the Emmaus Road conversations we hear from the Gospel of Luke today. The poet Lisa Muller wrote, "How swiftly the strained honey of afternoon light flows into darkness, and the closed bud shrugs off its special mystery in order to break into blossom, as if what exists so that it can be lost and become precious." I think of this service as I do my daily rounds of Rogers Lake. Walking for me, as I'm sure for many of you, isn't just a way to burn calories or clear my head as it is in ordinary times. It has become a daily spiritual practice, symbolic of the strange journey we and the rest of the world are sharing. Each footfall feels kind of precious, a way to forge a trail through shadow and light in this time of corona. As the days of isolating at home continue and the creep of COVID seems to come closer and closer to our neck of the woods, I find myself walking farther each day. This is a liminal time, as it was for disciples trying to make sense of the world following Jesus' life, death, and rising. In Luke's gospel, Cleopas and his unnamed friend are walking away from Jerusalem toward Emmaus. It is Easter day, and the road is long, so there's plenty of time for their grief to be shared. Conversation is punctuated by the stunning news of Jesus' crucifixion, death, and women telling the news of a rolled away stone. The stranger in their midst on the Emmaus Road seems quite clueless, though we know otherwise. So changed is Jesus that they don't really get who he is until later that night when they sit down for supper. Stay, stay, they implore him. Something I wish we could offer our neighbors during these days. Ultimately, an offering of hospitality leads to bread broken and sight restored. Luke highlights this moment when Jesus had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread, in the sharing of his very self. The Lucan text unfolds in movement if we look a little closer. The journeying becomes a time of action and reflection. We hear that after Jesus had vanished from their sight, the travelers returned back to Jerusalem with hearts burning as they go and tell what they've experienced on the road with the one whom they knew to be the risen Christ. In their reflections, Jesus is becoming not just a figure of the past, but alive in every step with their revelations on the road. As these two friends on the road show us, after their encounter with Jesus breaking bread, they walked back out into the world again, emboldened by a love that is not bound by death, but lives on. Over time, they would become braver, remembering the teachings of love they'd learned, felt their hearts alive, burning up with the truth of what it meant to love neighbor. The sojourners are on a journey, as are we all, trying to find a way to fathom how to live into this new, changed world. Something was set free in them. Their lives weren't just over, but beginning anew. I wonder what might be set free in us during these long days. What sustains you on this seemingly endless journey as the weeks pass by? Who is sharing the road with you? And where are the glimpses, revelations we could call them, of resurrection? And how will we take these lessons learned on the road into our unknown future? Like many of you, reading has been an essential enterprise on this journey for me. I'm rereading a favorite memoir called The Long Loneliness by Dorothy Day. Day uses the metaphor of the existential journey as she relates and tells her life about her lifetime of activism. She was a great reader herself and found friends in the works of Dostoevsky and Dickens, among others. A longtime journalist and activist, Dorothy Day catalogs her life from her early roots as a child experiencing the San Francisco earthquake. At that time, she witnessed her mother giving away food and nearly all their clothing to those in need who would arrive at their back door. Day would then go on to become a co-founder with Peter Maurin of the Catholic Worker Movement during the apex of the Great Depression in New York City. As you know, the Great Depression, like this pandemic we're living, had shaken the very foundations of society, causing massive unemployment and skyrocketing homelessness. As I read deeper into her memoir, today's news was in the background, and I learned that 1 in 8, or maybe it's 1 in 7 Americans, tens of millions of folks here and all over the world, are now unemployed. In 1933, at the height of the Depression, Day and Maurin opened what they called houses of hospitality and soup kitchens throughout the city, which are now throughout the world. In addition, they founded a newspaper, still going after 80 years, which they called The Catholic Worker, and it's still only 2 cents. Just the other day, I learned that my paternal grandfather, as a young man, was much devoted to Day's work and volunteered at the Catholic Worker in Boston, handing out their newspapers throughout the city. Towards the end of her life, when asked by some students about what she hoped to be remembered for, Day cited all the folks who'd sat around her kitchen table saying, "I hope they remember that I tried to make them good coffee and good soup. I've enjoyed getting to know them and admired their courage from going one week to the next." Day went on, "The greatest challenge of our day is how to bring about a revolution of the heart, a revolution which has to start with each one of us." For Day, this path was one of personal and societal transformation, a transformation she saw unfolding in love. That wisdom is one for us today. How do we live out our ethic of hospitality and inclusion when our doors are locked and gathering for an in-person worship service or a soup bowl fundraiser feels light years away? How do we break bread together in these days of physical distancing? It is daunting to find ways to deepen connections with one another and those most in need when a stop at the grocery store means being masked and gloved and fraught with the peril of floating germs. These are the questions to live into, says Rilke. We're experimenting, as you know, as a staff and congregation with our digital meeting house. Our ladies who stitch are spreading their incredible work of mask making to ensure that everyone who needs one has a Middlesex hospital-approved mask. Our Sunday school is gathering in real time on Sunday mornings at 10 to keep the momentum of connection and learning continuing. Steve's weekly sacred conversations with guests like Paul Verlaine from South Africa ensure that the place of true meeting happens wherever two or more are gathered on Zoom, bridging the miles from Old Lyme to Paul's doorstep in Africa in friendship. In spite of the debris of disease and ongoing pain of separation from one another, love in the time of Corona prevails, and we're sharing it with the whole world. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book, An Altar in the World, is our church book club read for this month. In it, she chronicles her geography of faith and the spiritual practices and questions that make for a life of reverence. A hike in the woods is reverence for all things earth and sky-bound. An encounter with a stranger is fodder for becoming more human. Simple, but profound stuff, and a reminder to me of the Emmaus roads we are all traveling, each in our own way. Every moment that we are living through this pandemic is a chance to see the holy again with new eyes. The crinkling, smiling eyes of an unknown neighbor waiting to enter the grocery store with me, azaleas rising pink in our driveway, resurrection on the road. Pulling out of that cemetery last week, my husband and I drove home on hushed and empty streets. Empty except for the countless walkers, many of them masked, all waving to us as we passed by. The words of Dorothy Day came back to me. We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with our community. See you on the trail, my friends. Amen. Well, that's our service for today. And now, friends, may the road rise to meet you.
May the wind be always at your back.
May the sun shine warm upon your face.
And the rain fall soft upon your fields.
And until we meet again, may God hold you.
And may God hold you in the palm of God's hands. Amen.